Jordan Sheridan, status coup in the house. I'm really happy to have human rights attorney Stephen Donziger join us. Fortunately, he's been making the rounds with independent media. We're going to talk about the corporate media blackout as well. But I definitely wanted to drill into what's been going on. Really, I mean, I've seen a lot of corrupt stuff, Stephen. I was at Standing Rock. I've covered Flint, the water cover up and crisis for many years. When I read your story, it sounds like something out of a corrupt third world country, to be honest. Um, we know there's a lot of corruption, or there's been a history of corruption in Mexico and other places. I wanted to first, for the audience, drill down before we get to your case on the atrocities you uncovered, you and other human rights lawyers and activists uncovered in Ecuador, that Chevron resulted in Chevron's, which was Texaco at the time, but Chevron's deliberate pollution and the deaths that resulted.
Well, thank you for having me, Jordan. Thank you for your great journalism. I have a lot of respect for what you do, and I'm really honored to be here today. This story really starts with what happened, with the answer to that question, which is, an American oil company, Texaco, now Chevron, went into really one of the most pristine ecosystems in the world, in the Amazon of Ecuador, and made a decision consciously to deliberately dump billions of gallons of cancer-causing toxic waste into the environment, into the waterways, into the water sources that people relied on for their drinking water, for their bathing, for their fishing. And they did it to save money at the expense of the environment, the indigenous peoples who live there, and human life, and animal life, plant life, biodiversity, survival of the planet, just so they can make $3 extra a barrel. It really was a mass industrial poisoning, and it happened systematically and deliberately from 1964 to 1992, when Texaco, during that entire time, was the exclusive operator of 6 oil fields in a 1,500 square mile area. And the worst part, besides the fact this was not an accident, it was a conscious decision to dump, is since they left, it's gotten worse, has not been cleaned up, and continues to poison the ecosystem. People who live there, people who might not be familiar with indigenous culture in the Amazon, most of these peoples don't have money as we know it. It doesn't mean they're poor. I mean, many of them are very prosperous societies historically with no money, because they have everything they need in the forest, clean water and food and animals and, materials to build shelter and medicines, and great deal of satisfaction with life. Okay. And that was like the life for thousands of years. And then in a few short years, Texaco came in and just ruined it all, poisoned it. When the pollution started in earnest in the early to mid 70s, after they had built hundreds of wells, a lot of the indigenous leaders went to the Texaco engineers and said, what are you doing? What's this black stuff? And their standard response was, oh, don't worry about it. It's like milk. It has vitamins, So when I first went down there in April of 1993, as part of an investigation team of lawyers and doctors, I knew it was going to be bad. I had no idea. I had no idea that I would see what I saw, which really was an apocalyptic nightmare with massive lakes of black oil on the jungle floor. Texaco had built these unlined waste pits to put oil waste, in the jungle. And they actually built pipes out the sides of them into rivers and streams to deliberately pollute and poison. It was so much worse than I thought. So, I decided I couldn't turn my back on it. And I teamed up with a bunch of other lawyers. And, we ultimately won the case, huge case in 2011, affirmed on appeal by multiple appellate courts, 6 appellate courts. And Chevron, in response, committed corrupt acts to lock me up. And here I am. I'm now on day 672 of house arrest in my home on a misdemeanor contempt of court charge filed by a judge who's a former tobacco industry lawyer after his charges were rejected by the regular federal prosecutor, the SDNY here in New York. Go figure. I'm the only person in America with no criminal record locked up on a misdemeanor pretrial. Only one.
And I wanted to ask. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one other point to illustrate the absurdity of this. The longest sentence ever imposed on a lawyer in New York, convicted of criminal contempt of court, is 90 days of home confinement. I mean, no one's even spent a day in jail. And that lawyer, Bruce Cutler, actually did something seriously wrong. And he got 90 days home confinement. I haven't been convicted, and I've had 672 days of home confinement. I am a corporate political prisoner. Make no mistake about it. This is a corporate prosecution. I'm not being prosecuted by the U.S. government. I'm being prosecuted by a private law firm, Seward and Kissel, a woman named Rita Glavin. Chevron is a client of this law firm. And Rita Glavin's other main client is Andrew Cuomo, where she's employed to basically try to undermine the credibility of, his accusers who are accusing him of some form of, sexual misconduct or inappropriate workplace behavior. So that's what I'm dealing with.
And I wanted to ask you both, because you're on the receiving end, but you're also a lawyer. One of the most bizarre and, to me, corrupt parts of this is once Chevron started going after you, filed the lawsuit against you in New York, claimed with bogus evidence, which we'll get into, that you bribed judges in Ecuador. The prosecutors with the government refused to try the case because they saw how flimsy it was. Ecuador obviously found Chevron guilty. Many other courts internationally on appeal agreed with Ecuador. So people understand, the government sometimes hires private lawyers. Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor in Flint, the state government hired a special prosecutor, a private lawyer. But I've never heard of a federal, state or federal prosecutor rejecting to prosecute something, and then a judge hiring a private law firm to prosecute that person on behalf of the federal government. What is the law behind that?
Well, I don't think that what you just described in my case is legal or constitutional. And that's one of our challenges. One of the ways they get away with this is they deny me a jury. I've been denied a jury in 2 trials now in the United States, and I'm still facing prison because the judge is running this scheme. That's a kind word, scheme. Loretta Preska and Lou Kaplan know that if I get a fair fact finder, their whole scheme will blow up. So the way they keep control is they deny me a jury. They have 2 judges running the whole ship. They appoint a prosecutor who's basically works for Chevron. Preska, who's my judge, is a prominent member of the Federalist Society. Chevron funds the Federalist Society, big funder. Kaplan, who charged me and appointed Preska, has, according to his financial disclosure forms, has investments in Chevron. I'm surrounded by Chevron. I mean, this is a Chevron prosecution. And I think the question we need to ask is, how can a society that purportedly believes in the rule of law, and by the way, I know we have a lot of problems in our justice system, police racism being the most obvious one. Okay, I'm not the only problem. But even with all of our problems, okay, systemic problems and just anecdotal problems, which are numerous, I've never seen a situation where a human rights lawyer, upon being successful in a human rights case, gets prosecuted by the corporation against whom he won a big judgment, prosecuted criminally in the name of the government. I mean, this is illegal under U.S. law and international law. And the Federal Appeals Court does not want, at least at this stage, to stop this from happening. I've gone up there twice and they just have said, sorry, we're going to wait for the trial to play out. We've gone to Merrick Garland. I think this is a huge litmus test for the Biden administration, right? I mean, on the issue of climate, how can they let a lawyer who does the frontline work be locked up on U.S. soil, in this way? So We've gone to Merrick Garland. 6 congresspersons wrote him a letter, including Jamie Raskin and AOC, and Jim McGovern and Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman and Rashida Tlaib. Didn't want to do anything. I'm the only lawyer in America begging the Department of Justice to prosecute me. Mm-hmm. I want to be prosecuted by a professional. I mean, look, they already turned down the case. So if they took over the case, they would probably dismiss it. But that's not the point. I mean, I can't even talk to this Chevron prosecutor. She doesn't want to have a conversation.